My name is Amber Mitchell, and at 29, I thought I had a pretty good handle on what family disappointment felt like. Being left out of Christmas was a special kind of sting, but I never imagined what was waiting for me next. When I tore open that envelope and saw a $52,000 invoice for my sister Jessica's new car, something inside me didn't just break, it shattered. That single piece of paper was the culmination of 10 years of being financially drained and emotionally blackmailed. They had finally pushed me too far. So, I made a phone call that would unravel everything. If you happen to be watching this surrounded by your own family, take a moment to appreciate those real connections. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe while I share the story of how I finally drew a line in the sand and learned what a true family is supposed to be. I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a sprawling 5-bedroom colonial home with perfectly manicured lawns and a garage big enough for 3 cars. To anyone looking in, the Mitchell family was the picture of success. My father, Richard, was a high-flying investment banker, and my mother, Diana, was a prominent figure in the local charity scene. We had all the trappings of a perfect life, but behind closed doors, our home was an emotional desert where affection was a transaction and love always came with a price tag. The moment my sister Jessica was born, when I was just 4 years old, the entire family dynamic shifted. She was the golden child, blessed with a beauty and charisma I could never hope to emulate. While I was the quiet, responsible student, Jessica was the vibrant, spontaneous one. My parents celebrated these traits in her, but in me, they were sources of irritation. When Jessica threw a tantrum, she was showing her passion. When I tried to express a need, I was being difficult. This double standard was the soundtrack of our childhood. Jessica got horseback riding lessons just by asking. I had to earn straight A's to even justify my modest request for piano lessons. For her 16th birthday, a brand new Audi appeared in the driveway. For mine, I got a used Honda and a lecture on the virtues of practicality. Despite it all, I pushed myself. I graduated at the top of my high school class, which earned me a scholarship to Cornell, where I majored in economics and business. While Jessica was busy dropping out of 3 different colleges, I was securing internships and building a solid resume. By the time I was 24, I had landed a job as a junior financial analyst at a top firm in Manhattan. At 27, I had my own apartment, a healthy 401k, and was completely independent. But that independence had a cost. Every family gathering turned into an opportunity for my parents to make subtle digs about how I was too focused on my career or too materialistic. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Here were my parents, people who measured worth by the luxury cars in the driveway and memberships to the country club, criticizing my ambition while simultaneously finding ways to profit from it. The exploitation started small. Could I help Jessica with her rent? Just for this month. Could I float Dad some cash for a business deal until his next big commission came through? Could I make a sizable contribution to Mom's charity gala, since I was doing so well? Every request was wrapped in the language of family unity, a promise of belonging. And every time I said yes, the requests got bigger. 3 years ago, I cleared $12,000 of Jessica's credit card debt after she swore, with tears in her eyes, that she would be more responsible. 6 months later, she'd maxed it all out again on a lavish trip to Bali. When I tried to express my frustration, my mother took me aside. Her explanation was that Jessica just experiences life differently, and she reminded me of how fortunate I was to have financial stability. Last year, I covered my parents' property tax bill when they claimed they were a little short, despite having just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons. When I questioned the timing, my father reminded me of all the sacrifices they'd made for my education, conveniently forgetting the scholarships and student loans I had only just finished paying off on my own. Even after all these incidents, a part of me still desperately craved their approval. This past October, I decided to make another effort to bridge the gap. I planned a family weekend in Manhattan, my treat. I booked a suite at a chic boutique hotel, got tickets to a Broadway show Jessica had been talking about, and made reservations at a restaurant that was notoriously hard to get into. The weekend was fine, I suppose, though my mother spent most of it critiquing the size and location of my apartment, while Jessica dominated every conversation with over the top stories about her latest boyfriend drama. After that weekend, the tension with Jessica got worse. She started calling me at work, always with some new financial emergency, and would send passive-aggressive texts if I couldn't respond immediately. At the same time, my parents ramped up their not so subtle comparisons. Jessica's financial recklessness was framed as living life to the fullest, while my stability was somehow painted as a character flaw. As November bled into December, I found myself filled with a familiar mix of dread and hope for the holidays. I had already bought thoughtful gifts for everyone, and I was mentally steeling myself for the usual routine of trying to earn their approval while simultaneously trying to protect myself. I had no idea that this Christmas was about to be different in the most gut-wrenching way possible. The truth hit me on December 15th, an ordinary Wednesday that became anything but. During my lunch break, I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. A post from my cousin Taylor. It was a picture of my entire family gathered around a massive Christmas tree in my parents' living room. The caption read, "Early Mitchell family Christmas. So blessed to have everyone together." Everyone, it seemed, except for me. I just stared at my phone, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. There was my dad carving a turkey, my mom arranging presents under the tree, Jessica laughing with our aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents, even some distant relatives I barely knew. They were all there. The party had apparently taken place the weekend before, and I hadn't even gotten a text message. With my hands shaking, I called my mother. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "Oh, Amber, sweetheart, how are you?" "Mom, why wasn't I invited to the family Christmas party last weekend?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. There was a beat of silence. "Oh, that. Well, it was all very last minute, darling. We know how busy you always are with work And Jessica mentioned you told her you already had plans. I had told Jessica no such thing. When I said so, my mother let out a dramatic sigh. Amber, please don't start. It was just a casual get-together, nothing formal. You know how Jessica gets when she feels overshadowed by you. She's going through a lot right now, and we just didn't want any tension. You understand, don't you, sweetheart? You've always been our strong one. Being the strong one was just code for being the one they could dismiss without feeling guilty. Before I could even formulate a response, she added that they would see me on Christmas Day for the real celebration. The invitation felt like an insult, a scrap thrown to keep me quiet. Later that night, Jessica sent me a string of texts. Sorry you missed the party, was so fun! Mom said you were busy anyway. BTW, can you help me pick out Mom's gift? Thinking jewelry but need your dollar input lol. There was no acknowledgement of the exclusion, no hint of a real apology. Just another request for my money, thinly veiled as sisterly bonding. That night, I lay awake, replaying a highlight reel of similar moments from over the years. The family trip to Cancun, I only found out about through Facebook photos. My college graduation dinner, where everyone showed up 3 hours late because Jessica had a minor fender bender that apparently required the entire family's immediate attention. The celebration for my promotion, which was cut short when Jessica called, sobbing about another breakup. By morning, I had reached a decision. I sent a text to my mother, telling her I wouldn't be coming for Christmas Day. I had made other plans. What plans could possibly be more important than family? She replied instantly. Family. The word felt so empty, so meaningless. I didn't answer her. Instead, I called my friend Leah. For years, she had invited me to join her family for the holidays. Unlike my own, Leah's parents had always treated me with genuine kindness. When I visited, they asked about my life and actually listened to my answers. They remembered small details about me without keeping a running tally of what I could do for them. Of course you can join us, Lee said, without a moment's hesitation. Mom always sets a place for you anyway. Your family to us, Amber. The stark contrast between her immediate, unconditional acceptance and my own family's calculated exclusion brought tears to my eyes. In the days before Christmas, I immersed myself in creating new traditions. I helped Leah's family decorate their tree. I baked cookies with her grandmother's recipe. I wrapped gifts for people who I knew would appreciate my presence, not just my presence. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt the genuine warmth that the holiday season is supposed to be about. Meanwhile, my phone was buzzing with increasingly manipulative messages from my own family. My father called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Jessica sent a barrage of texts, alternating between guilt trips and demands for shopping advice. Relatives who I barely spoke to all year suddenly had very strong opinions about my selfish decision. The only message that didn't feel toxic came from my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, who had always been a bit of an outsider herself. I heard you're not coming for Christmas, she said when I answered her call. Smart girl. I wanted you to know. That casual gathering was planned 3 months ago. I saw the invitations when I was at your parents' house back in September. The confirmation that their exclusion was so deliberate stung, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. Then, Patricia shared a piece of family gossip that made the timing of everything click into place. Jessica totaled her car last month. You know. Drove it straight into a ditch after one of her wild nights out. Your parents have been scrambling to figure out how to buy her a new one without dipping into their Hamptons renovation fund. I thanked my aunt for her honesty and tried to put the information out of my mind. I was determined to have a peaceful Christmas with people who actually wanted me there. Christmas Day with Leah's family was everything I didn't know I was missing. We ate until we were stuffed, played board games, and shared stories without any hidden agendas. No one kept score of who gave the best gift or made passive-aggressive comments about my career. When Leah's father raised a glass and made a toast to family, both born and chosen, I felt a sense of belonging that was deeper than anything I'd ever felt with my own relatives. I went back to my apartment that night full of leftover pie, genuine affection, and an invitation to their New Year's party. For the first time, I felt no urge to check my phone for messages from my biological family. I was finally starting to understand that family is supposed to add to your life, not suck the life out of it. I just had no idea how dramatically that lesson was about to be driven home. January rolled in with New York's typical post-holiday glooms, gray skies, slushy snow, and the city-wide hangover of returning to reality. I dove back into my work, finding a strange comfort in spreadsheets and financial projections that followed logical rules, unlike my family. 3 weeks after Christmas, I was starting to feel normal again. The sting of being excluded had faded to a dull achy, and I was channeling my energy into my New Year's resolutions, setting better boundaries, investing in real relationships, and finally enrolling in that financial certification course I'd been putting off. Then the envelope arrived. It was a Thursday evening, and I was sorting through my mail. Tucked between the usual bills and junk mail was a thick manila envelope with my parents' return address. There was no note, just my name and address written in my mother's elegant script. Curious, I opened it as the elevator climbed to my floor. Inside was a stack of papers. The top page was an invoice for $52,000 from Luxury Motors of Westchester. The purchaser was listed as Jessica Mitchell. The co-signer was listed as Amber Mitchell. I nearly dropped the papers. My world tilted. Below the invoice was the loan documentation for a brand new Mercedes GLE Coupe, complete with monthly payments of $138 for the next 60 months. And there, on the co-signer line, was my signature, a signature I had never, ever made. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely get my key in the lock. I stumbled into my apartment and collapsed onto the couch. I flipped through the rest of the document's insurance papers, an extended warranty, and a handwritten note from Jessica. "Thanks for helping with the new car!" The old one was totaled, and I really needed reliable transportation. Mom and Dad said, "You'd understand since you're doing so well. Payment details are attached. First one's due February 1st. Love you, sis. Soxo. The casual, breezy entitlement of her note made my stomach churn. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I immediately called my parents. My father answered on the second ring. Amber, did you get the paperwork we sent? Dade, what is this? I never agreed to co-sign for a car for Jessica. That is not my signature. Now, Amber, he said, his voice sliding into that patronizing tone he'd perfected over decades. Don't be so dramatic. We knew you'd want to help your sister. She's been through a real trauma with the accident. The accident that was her fault because she was driving drunk. I shot back. Aunt Patricia's words echoing in my head. That's beside the point. She needs a car for her new job. What new job? As far as I knew, Jessica hadn't held a steady job in years. She has an interview next week, he admitted. And she needs to make a good impression. The Mercedes will help with that. The sheer absurdity of his logic would have been laughable if the situation wasn't so terrifying. Dad, someone forged my signature. That's fraud. I never agreed to this. Your mother signed for you, he said. As if it were the most normal thing in the world. We knew you'd be difficult about it, but family helps family. You make more than enough to cover the payments. I was stunned into silence. The casual confession of a felony. The blatant assumption that my income was theirs to command. The complete and utter disregard for my autonomy. It was breathtaking. This is illegal, I finally choked out. I am not paying for Jessica's car. Don't be selfish, Amber. Not after everything we've done for you. I hung up. Within seconds, my phone lit up with texts from Jessica. Dad said you're being difficult about the car. Einen ED this car, Amber. You're so selfish. You don't even drive a Mercedes, so why do you care? If you don't help me, I'll be stranded. Each message was a fresh wave of disbelief. I turned off my phone, poured a very large glass of wine, and tried to make sense of what was happening. The next morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. I needed to figure out exactly what I was up against. A quick online search confirmed my worst fears. If my name was fraudulently used on a loan, I could still be held legally responsible unless I officially reported the fraud. With a growing sense of dread, I logged into my bank accounts to check for any other unauthorized activity. What I found sent a chill through my entire body. Someone had tried to access my main savings account just yesterday. The account holding my emergency fund and the down payment I'd been saving for a house. Thankfully, the unusual attempt had triggered a security alert, and the bank had frozen the account until I could verify my identity. When I called them, they confirmed the login attempt came from a recognized device, my old laptop, which I had given to my parents last year. The feeling of violation was overwhelming. While I was reeling from the car loan fraud, they were actively trying to drain my savings. This wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was calculated theft. That afternoon, an email from my mother landed in my inbox. Amber, your father is very disappointed in your reaction. Jessica is heartbroken that you would abandon her in her time of need. As your mother, I must say I raised you better than this. Family stands together. The car has already been purchased, and Jessica loves it. Don't ruin this for her. She's planning to post about it on Instagram this weekend and wants to thank you publicly for your generosity. Don't embarrass her by creating drama. The email was a perfect summary of our entire family dynamic. My feelings were irrelevant. Jessica's wants were the only thing that mattered. And my only value was what I could provide. The mention of social media was especially revealing. Appearances were more important than ethics, more important than the law. By the end of the day, my shock had hardened into something Elsie resolve. For the first time, I saw my family not through a filter of hope and obligation, but with perfect, painful clarity. This wasn't love. It wasn't even family. This was exploitation, pure and simple, and it had gone on for far too long. I made an appointment with a lawyer for the next day. Then, I called Aunt Patricia. I'm not surprised. She sighed after I laid out the whole sordid story. They did something similar to your cousin Ryan a few years back with one of their timeshare deals. He ended up just paying it to avoid a fight. They're counting on you to do the same. Not this time, I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Not anymore. The lawyer's office was in a converted brownstone in Midtown, its warm wood interiors a stark contrast to the cold January air outside. Natalie Hoffman, the attorney Leah had recommended, examined the documents with a sharp, practiced eye. Her expression grew more and more concerned. "This is textbook fraud," she said, finally taking off her reading glasses. "Your mother forged your signature on a legally binding financial document. The fact that she's your mother doesn't make it any less of a crime." "What are my options?" I asked, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup for warmth. "You have several," she replied, her tone direct. "And none of them are pleasant. You can report the fraud to the police, which would almost certainly lead to criminal charges against your mother. You can report it as fraud to the bank and the dealership without pressing charges yourself, though they might pursue their own legal action. Or you can pay for a car you never agreed to buy." Put so bluntly, the choice seemed clear. Yet, decades of being programmed to keep the peace made me hesitate. If I report the fraud, what happens to the car? It will most likely be repossessed, unless your sister or parents can qualify for the loan on their own. From what you've told me about their finances, that seems unlikely. I nodded, trying to process it all. And my relationship with my family? Natalie gave me a sympathetic look. "I can't advise you on the personal side of this, but ask yourself this: what kind of relationship do you actually have with people who would commit fraud against you?" It was a fair question, and it echoed in my mind as I left her office, armed with a clear legal path, but lost in an emotional storm. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls and 36 text messages. My father had escalated to threats. "If you pursue this fraud nonsense, you can consider yourself cut off from this family permanently. Your mother is beside herself with your ingratitude." Jessica's messages swung wildly between rage and manipulation. "I already showed everyone my new car. How could you do this to me? I told you I have that job interview. I need to make a good impression." Remember when I covered for you when you crashed Dad's boat? You owe me. I had never crashed our father's boat. The fabricated story was almost impressive in its audacity. Even extended family members had been roped in. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in a year were suddenly messaging me about family loyalty. Uncle Robert, my father's brother and business partner, called to give me a lecture about how family disputes should be kept private, suggesting I was being overly legalistic about a simple misunderstanding. This coordinated pressure campaign only solidified my decision. I forwarded everything to Natalie and followed her advice to document every communication and limit my responses. That evening, my boss, Sandra, called. I had gone back to work, but my focus was shot. Amber, is everything all right? The Wellington presentation seemed a bit off today, and that's not like you. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. I'm dealing with a family issue. My parents forged my signature on a car loan for my sister. I'm working with a lawyer to sort it out. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. I see, Sandra said finally. That's significant. Do you need to take some time off? No, I said quickly. Work is actually helping me stay sane, but I might need a bit of flexibility for some appointments. Of course. And Amber, don't let anyone take advantage of you. Family or not. I learned that lesson the hard way. The unexpected solidarity from my boss was a stark contrast to my family's behavior. It was another reminder that respect has nothing to do with blood. 2 days later, I discovered someone had tried to access my investment accounts. The attempt failed because of two-factor authentication, but the pattern was terrifyingly clear. I immediately changed every password and security question I had, removing any personal information my family might know. Then, my mother called. Amber Elizabeth Mitchell. She began, using my full name. Her classic move for laying on the guilt. We need to discuss this car situation like adults. Your father and I are hosting dinner tomorrow night. Jessica will be there. We expect you at 700. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. In the past, I would have gone, desperate for any chance to win them over. This time, I agreed for a completely different reason. I needed to deliver my decision face to face. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house, right on time. The familiar colonial facade looked the same as ever, imposing, perfectly kept, and completely devoid of warmth. Through the front window, I could see Jessica's new Mercedes parked proudly in the driveway, while my parents' cars were tucked away in the garage. My mother greeted me at the door with an air kiss that missed my cheek entirely. Finally ready to be reasonable, she asked, leading me into the dining room where my father and Jessica were waiting. Jessica was glued to her phone, barely glancing up. My father stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, his face a carefully constructed mask of disappointment and authority. Sit down, Amber, he commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite Jessica. Your mother made your favorite meal. Let's talk about this calmly. My favorite meal was actually Jessica's. I'd hated beef stroganoff since I was a kid, a small detail they'd never bothered to learn. As my mother served the food, my father continued. Before we begin, I want to express our profound disappointment in how you've handled this, involving lawyers, threatening fraud charges. This is not how our family operates. How does our family operate, Dad? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. By forging signatures. By trying to drain my savings accounts. By excluding me from family holidays and then expecting me to finance Jessica's life. Jessica slammed her fork on the table. Oh my God, are you still whining about Christmas? It was just a small party. It was the entire extended family, Jessica. Everyone but me. Because you're so judgmental. You make everyone uncomfortable with your perfect job and your perfect apartment and your constant criticism of my choices. My mother put a calming hand on Jessica's arm. Amber, you know your sister is sensitive. You've always been jealous of her, and frankly, it's unbecoming for a woman your age. The familiar script was playing out just as I'd expected. Jessica, the fragile victim. Amber, the cold-hearted villain. Reality didn't matter. I'm not paying for the car, I stated, my voice steady. What you did was illegal. I've frozen all of my accounts, and I've documented every attempt you've made to access my money. My father's face turned dark. After everything we have done for you. What, exactly, have you done for me? I interrupted, surprising even myself. I earned my scholarships. I paid off my own student loans. I built my career from the ground up with hard work. Meanwhile, you've enabled Jessica through 3 failed college attempts, bailed her out of massive debt, and now you've committed a felony to buy her a luxury car she can't afford. We raised you. My mother snapped. We gave you a home, an education, opportunities. That's literally the legal minimum required of parents, I countered. And you've been billing me for it ever since, as if I should be eternally grateful for you fulfilling your basic responsibilities. Jessica, always the one to escalate, shot up from her chair so fast it tipped over. You think you're so much better than us? News flash, Amber. Nobody likes you. Even your boyfriend left because you're a cold, calculating bitch. My ex-boyfriend had, in fact, left after I found out he was cheating on me with Jessica, a detail they didn't know I knew. The casual cruelty of her words was a final, clarifying blow. These people didn't just take advantage of me, they actively disliked me while expecting me to fund their lives. If you do not pay for this car, my father said, his voice low and dangerous, you are no longer a part of this family. No more holidays. No inheritance. No connection to the Mitchell name. The threat that once would have shattered me now felt like a key unlocking a cage. So, you're asking me to choose between paying $52,000 for a car I never wanted and a family that commits fraud against me, tries to steal from me, and treats me with nothing but contempt. I stood up and placed my napkin neatly beside my untouched plate. That's not a difficult choice at all. As I walked to the door, my mother's voice called after me. Jessica needs that car! What is she supposed to do? I turned back for one last look. The same thing I did when I needed a car. Buy one she can actually afford. The drive home was a blur of adrenaline. I had finally said all the things I had swallowed for years. The relief was immense, but so was the grief. I had just lost my family. Or maybe I had just finally admitted to myself that I'd lost them a long, long time ago. The aftermath of that dinner brought a strange kind of peace. Instead of the crushing guilt I had braced myself for, I felt lighter. Like I had finally set down a massive weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. Still, the doubts would creep in during the quiet hours of the night. Was I overreacting? Was I throwing away my family over money? Had I done something irreparable? These questions haunted me, so I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Laura Chen, who specialized in family trauma. In our second session, she asked me something that stopped me in my tracks. Amber, if a friend came to you and told you this exact story about her family, what would you advise her to do? The answer was instant and absolute. I'd tell her to run and never look back. Then why? Dr. Chen asked gently. Is it different when it's you? I didn't have a good answer. Meanwhile, my family doubled down on their campaign. Jessica plastered photos of herself with the Mercedes all over social media, tagging me in captions like, "Best sister ever!" Quen blessed by family support, and when your sister knows you deserve a little luxury, sibling love. The public narrative was clear. If I reported the fraud, I would be the monster who spitefully took away her prized possession. My parents took a more direct route. They started calling my friends and colleagues, feeding them a carefully edited version of events that painted me as unstable and ungrateful. Several coworkers told me my mother had called them, expressing concern over my fragile mental state. My father even called my boss, Sandra, to voice his worries about my ability to handle client funds given my emotional issues over family finances. Luckily, Sandra saw right through it. Your father called me today. She told me at our weekly check-in. I've never heard such obvious damage control in my life, and I deal with crisis PR firms. The invasion of my professional life was the final straw. That evening, I met with my financial advisor, Marcus, to make sure my assets were completely locked down. Based on what you've told me, I recommend a complete financial firewall, he advised. New accounts at different banks, updated beneficiaries on all your policies, and a full credit check to make sure there are no other surprises. The credit check uncovered another shock. There was an application for a high-end furniture store credit card in my name, dated just 2 days after the car was purchased. The application had been rejected because of the fraud alert I'd already placed, but the attempt itself was horrifying. This wasn't just about a car. This was the start of a systematic plan to exploit me financially. As January bled into February, Jessica's social media posts took a darker turn. She started sharing memes about toxic family members and recognizing narcissists. The projection was breathtaking. One post stood out, a selfie in front of the Mercedes with the caption, "Some people would rather destroy what you love than see you happy. Stay strong against the haters, even when they're family." The comments were a flood of support from relatives and friends who had no idea what was really going on. My cousin Taylor, the one who posted the original Christmas photos, commented, "Blood doesn't always mean love. Creating boundaries is self-care." The irony was a physical pain. That night, I got the text that finally pushed me over the edge. It was from Jessica, clearly drunk, sent from a friend's phone. You think you are so much better than everyone, but you are just a lonely BTCH with no one who loves you. Mom and Dad only put up with you for your money. We all laugh at you behind your back. Enjoy your empty apartment while I enjoy my car. I stared at the message, a strange sense of calm washing over me. The raw, drunken honesty of it confirmed everything I had suspected. They didn't love me. They tolerated me for my bank account. The realization should have destroyed me. Instead, it felt like permission. Permission to finally let go. The next morning, with absolute clarity and zero doubt, I called Natalie Hoffman. I'm ready to proceed, I told her. I'm reporting the fraud. All of it. Are you sure? Once we start this, it will be very difficult to go back. I'm sure, I said. They've left me no other choice. Then I called the bank that had financed the Mercedes. My name is Amber Mitchell, I said to the fraud department representative. I need to report a forged signature on an auto loan. The man who took my case, Robert, was kind but professional. He guided me through the process as I explained the entire situation, providing dates, documents, and Natalie's contact information. I understand this must be difficult, Ms. Mitchell, he said. Family fraud is unfortunately common, but reporting it takes a great deal of courage. What happens now? I asked. We'll conduct an investigation, which usually takes 5 to 7 business days. If we confirm the fraud, the loan will be removed from your name and your credit report. The lender will then take appropriate action regarding the vehicle. You mean repossession? Most likely, yes. Unless the other parties can qualify for the loan on their own. I knew they couldn't. Jessica's credit was shot, and my parents would never take on the debt themselves. That would defeat the whole purpose. I understand, I said. Please proceed. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment, the reality of my decision settling in. I had just set in motion a series of events that would lead to my sister losing her car and could result in criminal charges against my mother. The family I had always known was now broken beyond repair. And yet, alongside the grief, I felt a flicker of something new pride. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over them. The cost was immense, but the alternative, remaining their financial and emotional hostage, was no longer an option. I picked up my phone and texted Leah. I did it. I reported the fraud. Her response was immediate. I'm so proud of you. Want to come over for dinner? Dad's making his famous lasagna. I smiled through my tears. Family. Real family was still possible. It just wasn't with the people who shared my DNA. The bank moved with surprising speed. Just 3 days after my call, Robert from the fraud department contacted me. Ms. Mitchell, our investigation has confirmed your signature was forged. We have removed the loan from your name and financial responsibility. We are proceeding with the repossession of the vehicle. How soon will that happen? I asked, my stomach clenching despite my resolve. The repossession agent has been assigned. It could be today or tomorrow. They don't give a specific time, for obvious reasons. I thanked him and hung up, bracing for the storm. It hit less than 2 hours later. My phone erupted with calls and texts from Jessica. She left a series of hysterical voicemails. "They took my car! How could you do this to me? I'm stranded at the mall. You ruined my life!" I didn't answer. Instead, I blocked her number, something I should have done months ago. My parents were next. My father's voice, usually so calm and controlled, was shaking with rage in his message. "What you have done is unforgivable. Your mother is in tears. Jessica is devastated. I never thought my own daughter could be so cruel. Don't bother calling back. You are no longer welcome in this house." I blocked their numbers too. Then I went through my contacts, methodically blocking every relative who might act as their messenger. It felt like an amputation, but also like cutting out a disease. Social media turned into a war zone. Jessica posted a tearful video about her car being stolen due to a family betrayal, carefully crafting a narrative where she was the victim without ever mentioning the word fraud. Relatives and friends flooded her comments with outrage, condemning the anonymous villain who had hurt poor, sweet Jessica. I deactivated all of my accounts. The court of public opinion was irrelevant. The truth was all that mattered. The next day, the other shoe dropped. The bank had contacted my mother. Faced with hard evidence and the threat of criminal charges, she was panicking. Her lawyer called Natalie, making vague offers about family reconciliation if I would just withdraw my fraud claim. "They're scared," Natalie told me. "The bank has them dead to rights on a felony. They're hoping you'll back down to protect your mother." "What do you advise?" I asked. "It depends on what you want. If you want justice, we continue. If you want a clean break with minimal future conflict, we can negotiate a settlement. A formal admission of wrongdoing. They cover your legal fees, and we get legally binding agreements that they will never contact you or attempt to access your finances again." I chose the clean break. I didn't want my mother in jail. Not out of love, but because I knew the family drama would never end if she became a martyr. I wanted closure, not a never-ending saga. The negotiations were swift. Faced with real consequences, my parents agreed to all my terms. During this time, support came from the most unexpected places. Aunt Patricia called to say how proud she was of me. "Someone needed to stand up to them," she said. "They've been pulling this kind of stuff for years, but everyone's always been too afraid of being cut off." Even more surprising, my cousin Ryan reached out. "I heard what happened," he wrote. "Just wanted you to know I went through something similar with them 3 years ago. I wish I'd had your courage." The family I thought was a monolith was actually fractured, full of other people who had been quietly suffering. The day the settlement was finalized, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Jessica. "You think you've won, but you've lost everything. Enjoy your money and your empty life. We're all better off without you." Her words were meant to hurt, but they didn't land. I had lost my biological family, yes, but what had they ever really given me besides stress and manipulation? The emptiness I felt wasn't from their absence. It was from the realization that they had never truly been there in the first place. That evening, I had dinner with Lee and her parents. They had been my rock through the whole ordeal. To Amber, Leah's father said, raising his glass, for having the courage to choose self-respect over appeasement. As we ate and laughed, I realized I wasn't grieving the loss of a family. I was grieving the loss of an illusion, and I was celebrating the discovery that real family could be found in other places. 6 months passed. Summer arrived in New York, and with it came an unexpected sense of peace. The legal battle was over, the settlement was holding, and the silence from my biological family was absolute. My mother had avoided charges. Jessica had eventually gotten a more modest car. And I had started the long process of healing. It wasn't always easy. There were nights I'd wake up in a panic, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. Holidays and birthdays were landmines of complicated feelings, but there were also incredible benefits. With the constant family drama gone, my performance at work soared. I got a huge promotion and a bonus, which I invested in my future instead of using to bail someone else out. My apartment, once criticized as too small, now felt like my personal sanctuary. Most importantly, I had the emotional energy to invest in real relationships. I joined a book club, started hiking on weekends, and even began dating again, this time with a much healthier perspective. Therapy with Dr. Chen helped me recognize the distorted thought, patterns my family had programmed into me. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, that success wasn't something to apologize for, and that love should never come with an invoice. In July, Aunt Patricia invited me to her 40th anniversary party at her lake house. No drama, no other Mitchells invited, I promise, she said. The weekend was a revelation. Away from my parents' influence, my aunt was funny, vibrant, and incredibly insightful. Your mother was always like this, she told me as we sat on the dock. She always measured people by what she could get from them. Your father was the same. I always hoped you'd escape it. I did, I said. It just took me 29 years. She squeezed my hand. Better late than never. The most surprising development came in August. My cousin Taylor, the one from the Christmas photos, emailed me with a real apology. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, she wrote. I didn't understand the whole story then, but seeing how they've been acting since has opened my eyes. I'm sorry I was a part of hurting you. We met for coffee and cautiously started to rebuild a relationship, one based on our own terms. She told me that since I had left the picture, Jessica had become more demanding and my parents more manipulative with everyone else. It's like they need someone to use, she said. I realized then that it wasn't my job to protect anyone else from them. Everyone had to find their own way. By the fall, I had a new normal. My life was full, my career was thriving, and my friends were people who valued me for me. In October, a year after that disastrous Manhattan weekend, I got a text from Jessica. She'd used a colleague's phone to get around my block. I hate what you did, but I get it now, she wrote. Dad and Mom want me to pay for all of Thanksgiving. When I said I couldn't afford it, Dad told me to borrow from my 401k. I remembered what you said about buying things you can actually afford. You were right. Don't respond. I'll deny I ever sent this. I saved the message. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. She was finally starting to see the pattern. As the holidays approached again, I thought about how much had changed. That car invoice, which had felt like the end of the world, was actually a gift. It was the final push I needed to escape a lifetime of exploitation disguised as love. I learned that family isn't about DNA. It's about respect, support, and love without conditions. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's survival. And I learned that sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. This Christmas will be different. I'm joining Leah's family at their cabin in Vermont. I'm volunteering at a shelter on Christmas Eve. My life isn't empty without my biological family. It's fuller, healthier, and more peaceful than I ever thought possible. I'll always have the scars, but I've learned to see them as reminders of my own strength. If you're listening to this, and any part of my story feels familiar, please know that you deserve relationships that build you up, not break you down. Setting boundaries is necessary, and sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most peaceful places. I'd love to hear your own stories in the comments. Have you ever had to make a tough choice for your own well-being? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about resilience, and share it with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Thank you for listening. And remember, real family wants to see you grow, not just fund their lifestyle.